What is going on, everyone? Welcome to a movie review, first of my movie reviews. So after this movie review is over, please leave in the comments below how you think I did and any improvements that could be done. Of course, as you can see now, this movie review is for Iron Man 3, which is a movie that just came out this weekend in theaters on May 3rd. I saw it the day after, which is May 4th, with my family, and this is going to be a basic non-spoiler review for the movie, in case you're suspicious, in case you saw the last two Iron Mans. We're exactly fans of them. Now, to be honest, I didn't really like the second Iron Man very much. The first one was very good. In the Avengers, which of course Tony Stark was in, his character, of course, Iron Man, was very good as well. I like it equally as I like the Avengers equally as I like the first Iron Man movie. If you're wanting my opinion there, I'll review the Avengers someday in the future along with the original Iron Man. But we're gonna go with Iron Man 3 since this is new, this is fresh, this is hot, this is popular. Alright, so basic summary of the plot. It's only been a few months after the Avengers incident in New York where Tony Stark flew into a black hole in space and pretty much saved New York. He pretty much died and came back to life. Now, he's because of this, he's gotten a lot of anxiety attacks. He's stressing out over a lot of things. He's literally become obsessed with building suits. In the Avengers, he only had up to Mark 8, which the latest suit he had was Mark 8, which was that giant sort of suit that flew out of the sky and saved him. In this movie, he's up to Mark 42. You would not believe the variants of suits he has now. It's crazy. So going from Mark 8 to 42 in only a few months, you can definitely tell he's gone obsessed with it. And it's, his anxiety attacks plus his stress plus what he actually does, his quote-unquote hobby of building suits, has brought trouble to his I'm gonna say his fiance Pepper, which we've in the last few movies, she's been there. Meanwhile, while this is happening, not only does Tony Stark have to deal with some personal issues, but a Chinese terrorist rises up. His name is the Mandarin. He's pretty much threatening the United States, performing bombings. And Tony Stark feels obligated to go after him. He actually feels obligated for him to come after him, see how far he's actually willing to go. And as it turns out, Tony Stark is really one of their primary targets, to stop him from performing their whole plot. And that's basically where the spoilers start. So I'm just going to stop there. That is the basic background story on this movie, for those of you who are misinformed. That pretty much spoiled nothing, pretty much, except for the fact that it's Mark 42, but in cast interviews and such, they've revealed that he was up to Mark 42 in suits. So let's move on to the cast. Now, of course, you have Robert Downey Jr. as the always snarky character portrayed as Tony Stark / Iron Man. Brilliant performance as always. It's hard for Robert Downey Jr. to mess up Iron Man. It's like Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine. It's like you'll never find a better Tony Stark. You know what I mean? You'll never find a better person for Tony Stark other than Robert Downey Jr. He nailed it. I loved him in this movie more than any of his previous Iron Man movies. I mean, he's a great actor, honestly. If you've ever seen the Sherlock Holmes movies, he's great there as well. This movie is certainly his finest in performance, if you ask me. We have Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper. I believe I said her name correctly. She was great. She always does Pepper, of course. She's got to be Pepper for a while now. I don't think they'll ever replace her, unlike Don Cheadle. Well, whoever did him before, Terrence Howard. Yeah, we'll get to him later. Pepper does have a bigger role in this movie than previous movies. She's not just a love interest for Tony Stark. I mean, of course, she is always a love interest for Tony Stark, but in this movie, she has a bigger role than she did in previous movies. And lastly, we have Don Cheadle, who does Rhodey / War Machine / Iron Patriot. He's renamed. His War Machine suits are painted with American colors and it's transformed into the Iron Patriot, basically, to assault these terrorist attacks on behalf of America, because that's what America does. And he's pretty good in this movie. He has a lesser role than he did in Iron Man 2. I thought Iron Man 2 was a really solid performance for him, but he has a lesser role here. So if you were a fan of him, you won't get to see as much of him in this movie, unfortunately. On that, you have, I can't really remember the other actors as well, but you have some dude for the Mandarin. He does an extremely intimidating performance of him. and how his terrorist attacks are to basically teach lessons to the United States. The way they approach it is a very terroristic way. How he's insulting, United States influences and stuff like that. Trying to avoid spoilers, of course, but the Mandarin is very intimidating. I like the guy they cast for it. He definitely looks like he would in the comics. Very cool. And then you have Guy Pearce as something Archridge. I forget his name, but you see him in the trailers and such. You don't quite know his role in the movie until you see the movie, of course. But they keep it secret in the trailers for a reason. But Guy Pearce did a pretty good job in this movie for the role that he played. I'm trying to avoid spoilers here, but he does have a significant role in this movie as well. But all the actors were great. Marvel did a great job casting all the actors they did here. Of course, you got actors here and there. You have the president, you have the vice president. You got all these different actors that come together. Actors were great. Good job, Marvel, casting them. Let's move on to the second easiest subject to talk about, and that would be animation. Animation just blew me away in this movie. It was pretty much Marvel's finest. The Avengers is pretty big on CGI. I mean, it received a couple CGI awards, especially with, you had all the Chitauri, I believe they're called, the Chitauri aliens. You had the Hulk, of course, most brilliant Hulk transformation they've had over the years, since I'm a Hulk fan myself. Big Marvel fan overall. And then, of course, you have all these different suits. When they combine all these suits and, just the advancement of all the suits and how they've come together to be, just all together, an overall improvement, and a lot more demanding in CGI as well. But they did a great job putting those suits on screen, making them seem real. Not to mention, you're interacting. Pretty much, you're throwing CGI all over a guy. You're throwing CGI all over Robert Downey Jr. So the way they threw him around in this movie, how they would have to, have a stuntman work him around with the CGI parts, or rather, they have plastic parts hit him that are supposed to be the suit, but rather they're just covered in the little balls that are supposed to, help them animate the actual character model, the Iron Man suit model. But animation was just great. Lots of explosions. There's just lots of all this explosions and such. Animation, I swear, if you take your kids to this, you're gonna be if you do have kids, that is, if you're gonna take your kids to this, or your little cousin or any kid really, they're gonna totally dig this movie alone for the explosions, the animation, the epicness of Iron Man, and all the CGI glory that is in this movie. Definitely gonna get some nominees for CGI at the end of the year. Spectacular job, Marvel, for the CGI work you have there, or rather Disney. I don't know who to thank anymore. Let's move on to, we're gonna move on to dialogue, since this is another important thing to talk about. Dialogue in Marvel movies, it's usually mixed. It can either be a little too corny, or it can be a little too real. Avengers is a good example of dialogue. You had your mix of corny dialogue, just clever, snarky stuff, which is the usual stuff you expect from Tony Stark, and your overall, just to the point, generic, simple dialogue, to, establish a sense of realism. In this movie has that perfect balance of dialogue as always. Of course, Robert Downey Jr. brings all the, all the stuff he says, just really, really brings out his character overall as this snarky billionaire guy, and just the dialogue overall, my goodness, it's very hilarious. You have a lot of great jokes in this movie. I laughed at pretty much every joke attempt they pulled. It's great. You're gonna love the dialogue in this movie, and even when it is corny, you think it's completely appropriate given what situation they're under or what they do. You get a laugh out of the most unexpected situations as well. So humor, dialogue, and all that is great in this movie. Overall, really balanced. We're gonna talk about the mood and the sequence of events. To get a little more specific into stuff that I liked and didn't like in the movie, and this is where the rating can drop, or still stay out of 10. Overall, I have to say that this movie had a much darker feel than either the Avengers or the previous two Iron Mans. Iron Man already is very grounded, especially when in the first movie you blow up his military, you blow up his military jeep, and the terrorists put him in a cave, demand him to make bombs, and then they kill his they kill his friend in the cave, and it's very dark and realistic as well. In this movie, it's of course it's going to be realistic, even though there's some elements in the movie that just don't seem like humanly possible. It is very, very dark. Stuff is going to happen when you least expect it. There's a lot of suspense. That goes in hand with stuff being dark, is that there's a lot of suspense. A lot of twists as well. This goes into specifics as well, but overall the movie is very dark, and that's a result of having a different director. Past two movies, Jon Favreau, I believe I'm saying his name correctly, directed Iron Man 1 and 2. In case you don't know him, he voices Pre Vizsla in the Clone Wars, for you Clone Wars fans. I know, the director of Iron Man voiced a guy in the Clone Wars, pretty awesome, and he directed Cowboys and Aliens. He was non-director in this movie, but he was executive producer, I believe, so he still had a pretty big role. I guess he's there for the sake that he pretty much owned the first two movies, so, he has to stick around for the third movie. If it's not, doesn't stick around for the third movie, then, he wants to be a part of it, because he pretty much built this Iron Man phenomenon, I'm not going to say that word, phenomenon. There we go. I said that correctly that time. Instead, he had Shane Black directing this movie. I really like the way they approach this movie, though, because the darker feel was very much appropriate for the stuff that happened in this movie. You wouldn't take some of the stuff in this movie seriously if it wasn't dark. Plus, it's a threequel, so stuff's always going to be dark in a threequel. They go all out at some parts. Honestly, this has to be the darkest Marvel movie I've seen. So do expect to be really surprised at some parts because of just how low they will go. How low they will go is the term I'm going to use. Suspense is off the hook in this movie. A lot more suspense than usual Marvel movies. Some pretty big stuff's going to happen that I can't say, unfortunately. And there's a bit of stuff in this movie, such as the Iron Patriot, where in the comics, Iron Patriot, I believe, was it was like the anti-Avengers, basically, but it was ruled by Marvel villains, and I believe the Iron Patriot was Harry Osborn, which is a Spider-Man villain, who does not exist in this universe because he is owned by Sony. That's a big copyright ground issue there, because this universe is owned by Disney, that universe is owned by, that universe is owned by Sony, yes, Sony. So they used a lot of comic book stuff in this movie that is in the comic books, and you will recognize from the comic books. But when you put it on screen, it's not like the story of it is not like it is in the comic books. So they do break stuff here and there, which is one of the reasons why my rating on this movie might drop a little while avoiding spoilers. But besides the point, the darker feel, like I said, okay, I'm back to the darker feel thing again. The sequence of this event, the plot of this movie is also a little more confusing than the past two movies. The past two movies, you could watch it without thinking. Stuff would just happen, things would happen. In this movie, the plot really starts somewhere from the beginning, and it works its way along. It's one of those stories that works its way along as it goes, unlike a story that you could just sit down and watch. So because of this, you're going to have to be paying attention to what you're watching and understanding what you're watching and, where they need to go from here. As an overall, enemy, as a villain, of course the Mandarin is the main villain in this movie. I can't really say much about him, but the villain in this movie is really good, I have to say, with the absence of a very prominent villain in the past two movies, as we had Ironmonger in the first movie, and we had Ivan Vanko, what's his name? Whiplash, yeah, in the past two movies, which were good villains, but I think this one is definitely the best. It makes it equal for Iron Man overall in many different ways. You'll see that if you watch the movie. I think that actually brings me down to conclusion. I've said pretty much everything I want to say about this movie. Iron Man gets an 8.5 out of 10. Once again, great dialogue, great acting performance, killer CGI, just a great plot overall, good story. Some, tarnishing of the comic books that will anchor fans. Some stuff that might not make quite as much sense as it could. From here to there, a lack of a simple plot. Now, I would bring down the rating for that only for the sake that most Marvel movies are pretty simple to begin with, and that doesn't hurt the movie. It's just it's a little confusing understanding the plot at some parts. But overall, this movie gets an 8.5. Go see it. If you saw Iron Man 1, go see it. If you saw Iron Man 2, go see it. If you saw The Avengers, go see it. you'll walk away from this movie just being blown away by how much stuff has happened. And a little tip, sit through the credits. If you do see this movie, sit through the credits. You'll find a surprise. So thank you for watching my review. Tell me what you think in the comments below of this movie, Iron Man 3. Please avoid spoilers if you can. This is a non-spoiler review. We don't want the viewers to get angered over the comments. We want to avoid that as much as possible. So I thank you all for watching, and I'll be seeing y'all later.